Good day and welcome to Mrs. B Teaches English. Today we are looking at the poem Motho ke motho ka batho ba bang. A person is a person because of other people by Jeremy Cronin. So Jeremy Cronin was born in Cape Town in South Africa in 1949. He became an active part of the South African Communist Party and was arrested and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment for being active in the struggle against apartheid. We see that after he was released and South Africa became a democracy, he then became a member of the parliament. He is celebrated as a South African writer, author, and a very noted poet. So let's read through this very interesting poem together. Motho ke motho ka batho ba bang. A person is a person because of other people. By holding my mirror out of the window, I see clear to the end of the passage. There's a person down there, a prisoner polishing a door handle. In the mirror, I see him see my face in the mirror. I see the fingertips of his free hand bunched together as if to make an object the size of a badge, which travels up to his forehead, the place of an imaginary cap. This means a warder. 2 fingers are extended in a V and wiggle like 2 antennae. He's being watched. A finger of his free hand makes a watch hand's arc on the wrist of his polishing arm without disrupting the slow rhythm of his work. Later, maybe later we can speak. Hey, wat maak jy daar? A voice from around the corner. No, just polishing, boss. He turns his back to me. Now watch his free hand, the talkative one, slips quietly behind. Strength, brother, it says, in my mirror, a black fist. So this is a poem really about Ubuntu. I am because you are. This is an important concept when considering resistance. It's all about human solidarity. This poem captures the scene of one prisoner communicating discreetly with another under the watchful eye of a warder. The cleverness of the participants is shown as they find ways to maintain human contact, communicating with sign language in defiance of the deprivation of imprisonment. The communication, which is the human contact, provides the prisoner with a sense of comfort and encouragement. As readers, we are invited to imagine how the human connection described in the scene would have provided the speaker with considerable comfort, strength, and encouragement. This scene, like I said, really demonstrates Ubuntu in action. So let's jump in and look at a line-by-line analysis. He says, by holding my mirror out of the window, I see clear to the end of the passage. So this poem is set in prison. The speaker is a prisoner and is confined to his cell. The only way he can see out of his cell is to hold a mirror out of the window. And that way he is able to see another prisoner that is polishing a door handle at the end of the passage. A window usually provides a view of the outside, but they could not see the outside world, so instead it allowed him to see the passage outside his cell. This really emphasizes the lack of freedom that they had. The mirror then is very significant because it's a very personal item. It shows us that he has very few possessions, because when you go into prison, they search you and they take away things that you can use to either harm yourself or other people or to escape. And this might also show us that he hasn't been in prison very long, because that is something that they might have confiscated. It's also significant because usually we use a mirror to reflect on ourselves, but here it is used as a means of communication. Then we spoke about the irony of the window that usually allows us to see the outside, but here it does not. The word clear there, that means that there is no guard in sight that is blocking him from seeing the other prisoner. So they are now free to talk. There's a person down there, a prisoner polishing a door handle. very significant here is the fact that he refers to the prisoner first as a person, then as a prisoner, because he is still human despite his incarceration. He's different from the prisoner who is polishing the door handle. Perhaps he was considered a bit more serious in terms of his offense, because we know that the less serious offenders were allowed a little freedom by having them perform these menial, boring, time-wasting chores, like polishing door handles. Then we see an interesting inversion. He says, "In the mirror I see him see my face in the mirror." Do you notice the reflection that is being portrayed here? The prisoner who is polishing the door sees the face of the narrator in the mirror. "I see the fingertips of his free hand bunched together as if to make an object the size of a badge, which travels up to his forehead, the place of an imaginary cap." So the prisoner down the passage touches the fingertips of his free hand together as if he's making a badge, and then he brings them up to his forehead to indicate that this badge would be on an imaginary cap. And this, we read, has a very significant meaning. So free hand there, the prisoners are not free to communicate, but the hand is. This suggests that the guards did not understand the sign language used by the prisoners, and of course they did also not see it. So there's an irony in the use of freehand. Then the description of the badge is of course a symbol for authority. This warder has some sense of authority in the prison. We see that he starts to communicate with the narrator using signs. There's the repetition of hand, see, and mirror throughout the poem, and this emphasizes the non-verbal communication that connects the prisoners. They are not free to speak to each other, but that does not mean that they cannot communicate. So now Cronin uses a very interesting technique in terms of the typography of this poem. He places "this means a warder" on the right-hand side, and he does this in brackets. So the comments on the right interpret the hand signals that the speaker sees as described on the left. The words in italics are the interpretation of these hand signals. So an explanation of the non-verbal communication follows in the brackets to allow the reader in on the secret language that they're using. Two fingers are extended in a V and wiggle like two antennae. He's being watched. So the prisoner waves two fingers like antennae at his forehead as a warning to indicate that the warder is watching him. This time the interpretation is given directly without the words "this means." So gradually we are now being allowed into this, and they are assuming that the reader is catching on. They don't need to say "this means" anymore. His fingers are compared to antennae. There's a simile here. They wiggle like two antennae. Simile. It's effective because antennae are usually used to communicate, and the prisoners have developed a sign language, which then of course ties in with the theme of communication. Here he is explaining that he is being watched. A finger of his free hand makes a watch hand's arc on the wrist of his polishing arm without disrupting the slow rhythm of his work. Later, maybe later we can speak. So using his free hand, the prisoner mimes the hands of a watch moving in an arc on his wrist, all the while continuing his work at a deliberately slow pace. The mimed watch hand communicates that he and the speaker can possibly speak later. The interpretation is again given directly, but this time as if these are actual words that the prisoner is using. This shows the growing understanding of the language used between the prisoners, but also between the poet and the reader. So he indicates that he will communicate later. And we see that he's working very slowly, and this can be for many reasons. It can be because it's now a routine. It can be because he has absolutely nothing else to do, so why not do it slowly? It can also be because he does not want the warder to notice that he is also communicating in between. It gives him time to communicate. He's trying to conceal this communication because he knows that they will be in trouble if they are spotted. Then please notice the use of the alliteration finger of his free hand there. And you will see that there's not a lot of sound devices being used in this poem. Hi, wat maak jy daar? A voice from around the corner. So the italics indicates the warder's direct speech here, but also that he's speaking in another language. He's speaking in Afrikaans. So there's somewhat of an authoritative tone that is conveying a sense of control that the guard has over the prisoner. From now on, you will see on the right-hand side that the poet does not use brackets for the words on the right. It is as if there's no need anymore for an aside or an interpretation. We understand what is going on here. So then the prisoner replies, he says, no, just polishing, boss. So the prisoner replies that he's merely polishing. The use of boss here is very cynical and mocking, and he shows that the prisoner really has disdain for this warder. Of course, boss is the Afrikaans word there for boss, referring to a person that is in control, but he's perhaps not using it with the respect that the warder would expect here. It's also slightly sarcastic, you can say, because what else would he be doing? All his liberties have been taken away. He is only allowed to polish, so what else would he be doing? Then we return to the speaker and the prisoner. He turns back to me. Now watch his free hand, the talkative one. Slips quietly behind. Strength, brother, it says. So the speaker watches in the mirror as the prisoner turns his back to him, but places his free hand clenched in a fist behind his back. This black fist equates to the black power salute, which communicates to the speaker that they are brothers and that he must be strong. A raised clenched fist is the black power salute commonly associated with black nationalism and socialism that we are aware of. So the italics here in Strength, Brother, it says, makes it seem as if the two prisoners are speaking directly to each other. There are no brackets because there is no need to interpret the sign language. It is understood. Up to this point, the hand signals are described on the left and the interpretation then follows on the right. But in these last two lines, you will see that the order is inverted. The interpretation is given first, but still on the right-hand side, and then the hand signal is described, but now on the right in the last line. So we have some personification of the hand that is talking. It's talkative. It's the way that they are using to communicate. This is their only means of communication, and the communication really reassures the narrator that he's not alone. Again, we notice free hand there. The hand is free, but he is not. Then the word quietly is significant because it really shows us that they are trying to act discreetly. They don't want to be caught. And then the interpretation of this, he's encouraging the prisoner to be patient and not to lose hope despite their circumstances. Then we go to the last two lines. In my mirror, a black fist. So everybody cannot see what's happening here, but the prisoners can. And this really symbolizes freedom, defiance, and pride. Even though they are oppressed, they will not be discouraged. They will keep fighting for freedom. This is also relating to the theme that strength does come from supporting one another, or Ubuntu. their solidarity. Now we're going to look at some technical aspects of the poem. So themes, there are three main themes that we can identify. The first one is, and of course, of Ubuntu. An individual's strength is increased when he's part of a group or a collective. A person is a person because of other people. Motho ke motho ko batho ba bang. At great risk of himself, if he's caught, the prisoner communicates with the speaker, who can only see out of his prison cell via the mirror that he extends through the window. The prisoner gives the speaker some hope that maybe they can speak later, and even some courage through the black fist. Then the second theme, power of communication. Human solidarity. We see triumphs in the silent communication between the two prisoners. They're not allowed to communicate, but using hand signals gives them some form of power in their unity and strength. The use of hand signals emphasizes that words are not always needed. How we relate to one another, especially in times of need, that is what is important. So just showing that I understand how you feel and giving some form of feedback, that is enough. Then the last one, courage in adversity, and it really does tie in with Ubuntu. The prisoner shows great courage when he uses hand signals to communicate with the speaker, who is confined in his prison cell. His communication with the speaker ultimately gives the speaker encouragement to stay strong and demonstrates that human solidarity will ultimately triumph over adversity. Then I said to you that there are very few sound devices in the poem. We have that alliteration, finger of the free hand, but that's basically it. And there's a reason for it. It's very significant. Although this poem is all about communication, and especially between those two prisoners, communication is non-verbal. It's silent here. They're using hand signals. So the men communicate via hand signals that are reflected in this mirror, and that is why the voice is silent, and that is also why there are so few sound devices. So the lack of sound devices is very, very appropriate because it suits the non-verbal communication that they are using. Tone, we can say that there's a tone of determination, perhaps admiration and pride in this poem. The mood, how the reader feels, we feel hopeful for the future and perhaps a little defiant with the two prisoners. Finally, a note on punctuation. So you will see that in this poem, punctuation and typography is very, very important. The punctuation and the typography convey the poet's message, because we see on the left-hand side, we have the narrative of what is going on, and then on the right-hand side, using italics and using brackets, and later then removing them, we have the explanation of the non-verbal communication. So typography there, very, very important. Italics also used to indicate another language. Then the full stops really create the staccato or short effect. So the communication doesn't really flow freely here because of the water, because of the potential of being caught. They struggle to communicate, and that is why the full stops are so significant throughout this poem. And then, like we said, the brackets are used for explanation. And that's really the end of this poem. So it's a lovely little poem, very well crafted in terms of typography and in terms of punctuation and in terms of describing Ubuntu. And I really hope that this video lesson has helped you to understand the poem a little bit better.